Today on Notsam Wrestling, we are only a week away from the King and Queen of the Ring, as well as AEW's Double or Nothing. More clues from Uncle Howdy, new stipulations added to the Cody Rhodes Logan Paul match, and yeah, we've hit episode 500. This is Notsam Wrestling. Let me welcome you all to Notsam Wrestling 500, the 500th weekly episode of Notsam Wrestling. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about this because when it comes to Notsam Wrestling, the key word is wrestling. This is a wrestling podcast that happens to be under the Notsam umbrella, not a Notsam podcast under the wrestling umbrella. So we try to keep the Notsam out of it as much as possible. But look, when I say episode 500, I don't mean the 500th show, because if you count Patreon podcasts, bonus podcasts, special interviews, emergency podcasts, I mean, it's well over, it's got to be well over 600 or 700 at this point. And then if you factor in all the non-wrestling podcasts, whatever. I mean weekly shows, weekly numbered episodes. I don't believe that we have ever missed a week on Notsam Wrestling, which I don't know any other podcast in the world that has gone 500 episodes without missing a week. Now, some of you might go through and realize that I actually did miss a week around episode 89 or something like that, and I just don't remember. But I don't think so. I haven't missed many anyway. This is the 500th week of Notsam Wrestling. We'll, of course, hit another milestone because of the way math works and the way there are 52 weeks in a year, that in October we'll hit our official 10-year anniversary. But that's October 28th, I believe, 2014, was the first episode of what was then the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. We did 199 episodes of the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast, and at episode 200, we flipped it over to Notsam Wrestling in one of our, and it was one of the early live shows that we did. But I mean, it's gone very, very quickly. I remember it all. I remember when we first started doing live shows out of Caroline's on Broadway in New York City in Times Square, and what a remarkable success. A lot of you guys made those shows. I remember taking this podcast to people in radio and going like, hey, I'd like to do a wrestling show. And at the time, you know, this was over 10 years ago when I started talking to people about it, and they said, you want to do a whole show about wrestling? When you want to be like, well, we talk a little bit of this, a little bit of that, we talk about wrestling here, but then this element of it, I go, no, I just want to talk about wrestling. I don't know if we can do a whole show about it. And I went to my wife at the time and I said, I think I'm going to start a podcast. Just do a wrestling podcast, just a space for all my wrestling content. And this is before I had most of my jobs. At the time, I might have had one, maybe two jobs. I had no kids. It was an entirely different life. And my wife goes, are you sure you have time to take on a weekly podcast? Little did she know, we were starting an entire industry called Notsam Wrestling. We went through many eras. Of course, when the show first came out, it was very interview-focused. The State of Wrestling was a small part of what was a very interview-focused podcast. I remember one of the first interviews that really took off was the interview that I did with Roman Reigns. I think it was recorded right before he won the Royal Rumble, but ended up airing right after he won the Royal Rumble. And Reddit believed that the WWE had sent him to my podcast to turn heel, to start the heel turn. See, I guess they were believing that everything counts before we even made that a rule of the podcast. I was also, by the way, in the history of this podcast, the very first podcaster to be accused of being a WWE shill. It's really interesting because now, all these years later, I hear people going like, oh, they call me a shill on Twitter. They were calling me a shill before Twitter was even really Twitter. This is going back to where they thought they were sending wrestlers before I had done 100 episodes. And they thought WWE was sending wrestlers on my show to turn heel because I was such a shill. This is how long I've been a shill, way before I was working for the WWE. Then, of course, there was the Linendahl era. Everybody remembers that, when Katie would come on and do the State of Wrestling segment. And that was kind of one of the things that helped the State of Wrestling evolve into what really makes up the body of this podcast until it became what it has become. I think another step in that evolution was going on YouTube and doing the whole show as a video show on YouTube. That's only been going on about a year. I think we were over 400 episodes in. That was the night after WrestleMania 39 that we made it a full-time weekly video podcast. So much has happened in the last 500 weeks. And I thought we could celebrate a few ways. Number one, bring back the summer logo, make it add some color, some brightness to the imagery behind Notsam Wrestling. I think that's important. You'll see that sprinkled about everywhere starting now. But also, I wanted to figure out a time that we could all connect, a time that we could connect to celebrate both 500 weekly episodes, 500 weeks, and the 10-year anniversary. And I go, okay, well, it's late May, right? So June, July, August, September, October. So there's like 5 months in between the 500 episode celebration and the 10-year celebration. So when is the appropriate time to celebrate it? I say right in the middle. I'd say right in the middle of that time would be the perfect time to celebrate it. As a matter of fact, I think the perfect time to celebrate it would be as the summer is at its hottest. August the 1st, the very beginning of August. And I said, August 1st would be a great time to celebrate, to get everybody together, to celebrate what we've all accomplished. And then I go, well, what day? Oh, that's a Thursday. August 1st is a Thursday. The Thursday before SummerSlam. Cleveland, Ohio, I'm talking to you. If you're going to SummerSlam already, I'm talking to you. Notsam Wrestling Live is back, baby. We had a great show Royal Rumble weekend. We had a great show WrestleMania weekend. Let's hit the next of the big four and show up in Cleveland at SummerSlam, August 1st, 7:30 p.m. Hilarities. Hilarities Comedy Club in Cleveland hosts the next live Notsam Wrestling podcast, August 1st, 7:30 p.m. And you can get your tickets now. Either go to the Hilarities site, you can Google it, or you can just go to notsam.com and click on the tickets link. It will take you right to the event page at the Hilarities Cleveland website. The night before, SmackDown's going to be in Cleveland. The next night, SummerSlam will be in Cleveland. So that's what you're doing on Friday. That's what you're doing on Saturday. What are you doing on Thursday? Let's kick the party off together with a live Notsam Wrestling podcast. These shows are only getting more and more fun. You can go on the Notsam Wrestling YouTube page, and you can see Rhea Ripley and Samantha Irvin, both on the Royal Rumble weekend shows. You can see the R-Truth interview from the WrestleMania weekend show. I may also be putting up the Candice LeRae portion of that show as well. But if you want to see the whole show, the whole enchilada from start to finish, you got to be there live. And be there live in Cleveland, SummerSlam weekend, Thursday, August 1st, 7:30 p.m. Notsam Wrestling comes to Cleveland to celebrate 10 years of doing some of the funnest broadcasting that I've done in my entire career. It is such a blessing to be able to dissect this stuff with you guys, and one does not achieve a platform without an audience. So the fact that you guys allow me to come on here every single week and break this stuff down to the minutia and make it seem like because you're watching or because you're listening that I'm not a crazy person for doing it. That I can say, instead of doing, the people around me, what are you, nuts? Why are you watching with this much detail? And instead of saying, because I'm a crazy person, I can say, because the people demand it. Because the Not Samsonites demand it. That is why we're here. That is why we're here for Notsam Wrestling. And I appreciate you making it possible. And I hope that you will be there in Cleveland, August 1st, 7:30 p.m. at Hilarities, Thursday before SummerSlam, so we can all celebrate this thing together. Because by then, everything will be changed. By then, I would imagine, we'll see Uncle Howdy. So if you subscribe, I hope you're subscribed to this podcast. I hope if you're listening, you subscribe whatever audio feed you get, be it Apple or Spotify or whatever. Hopefully you're subscribed to the YouTube channel so you can watch these shows every single week and leave comments and do all that. And there were a lot of comments left on the special bonus show, the emergency podcast that I put up on Thursday night at like midnight. This is the worst time to drop content, but it had to happen. It had to. The siren had to ring again, a siren that has not rung since pre-WrestleMania, now rings again for what has to be Uncle Howdy. We've been following these QR codes everywhere we go, left and right. And on Monday night, they drop a set of QR codes. And I know if you watched or listened to the show that I did earlier this week, I'm just bringing you up to speed. They drop a QR code that's a set of it's a URL that's a set of JPEGs, and it's all these notes, but at the bottom there's a picture of a floppy disk and it says 4 p.m. Twitch. You figure out it's Twitch. At 4 p.m., the WWE Twitch channel was taken over, and a 55-minute stream was put on, which was a therapy session for what I'm assuming, people are jumping to different conclusions. Could be Bray Wyatt, it could be Joe Gacy, it could be The Fiend, it could be Sister Abigail, it could be Alexa Bliss. I think it was Uncle Howdy personally, but I don't know. But we went over the entire video on a special emergency podcast, and I watched this video, and I took a page and a half of notes and was paying attention to as many details as I possibly could. But to me, much bigger than the stream itself, much bigger than anything dropped in any of the QR codes, is the development of the acknowledgement of the QR codes. That for the 8 weeks or so that these QR codes have been going, from the time that the Bray Wyatt documentary came out until now, they've never been acknowledged, really. And on Raw, there was an acknowledgement by Michael Cole and Pat McAfee. I look like Leonardo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood pointing at the TV screen when Michael Cole said, well, that's one of the technical glitches or whatever. Another one of those mysterious QR codes. And Pat McAfee sounding off about how weird it was. Yeah, and then, they go on, but it was an acknowledgement. This is the first time we're sitting here going like, yeah, this is happening. And once we're doing that, it's like we know we're near the end. There's no way that this continues on past, because commentators can't just go on the air every week for the next 6 weeks and go, there's another one, because they'll start to sound foolish. Like at this point, the WWE should have better control over its television production. Then on SmackDown, they go even further. Corey Graves and Wade Barrett not only acknowledged it, but they said, we want to talk about this, that a QR code was posted on Monday Night Raw, and it led to the WWE's Twitch channel being taken over for 55 minutes. And we're going, oh, this is not just some sort of, there's mainstream storyline stuff happening right here, and then over here is everything else. Over here, all this stuff on the internet with these QR codes, that's just for you to have fun with. But we're doing a television show on this side. Now it's all come together. And not only did Graves and Barrett talk about the fact that this went up on the Twitch channel, but Graves even said, very importantly, well, we all remember what happened the last time this was going on. And then they kind of moved on from there. But it's this connection. It's this connection to the White Rabbit, the Bray Wyatt saga that brought him back to the WWE the first time. So we did get another QR code. Not only did we get those acknowledgments, because to me, those acknowledgments on commentary would be enough. The Michael Cole and Pat McAfee talking about it, and then Wade Barrett and Corey Graves talking about it even more. So that is important to me. When we're doing stories like this, that it grows exponentially each week, or even each show throughout the week. That if we do this on Monday, if we're going to do something on Friday, it should be a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, right? If we're just doing the QR codes should reveal a little bit more. and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, until we get to a 55-minute session chock full of stuff. So that's why I liked that not only was there an acknowledgement, but a feeling that the acknowledgement was growing as the days continued. Now, we've discussed about these QR codes that 525 was in the metadata of a couple of them. And so the theory right now amongst us reading QR codes on the internet is that King and Queen of the Ring is when we will see the debut of this Uncle Howdy, whatever, Wyatt family-based faction, which, as I said in the previous analysis, I think is going to be a group of people that are interpreting the teachings of Bray, an offshoot to the story instead of necessarily a continuation, because you can't continue the story when the author is no longer with us. But what you can do is have a group that is as aware of the story as anybody could possibly be, that has been a part of every word of that story, and then taking those words and offshooting in this direction. And whether they think it's because it's what he would have wanted or not, they could think that, but that doesn't make it so. But we did, as well as the commentary stuff, get a QR code on SmackDown. The QR code basically led immediately to a video, and the video was it was a still. It was a photo of a child in like a skeleton costume and face paint on Halloween. And the child's eyes are blacked out. So it's very difficult to tell exactly who the child is. But I'll be damned if that child doesn't look like a Rotunda. I don't know if it's Wyndham Rotunda. I don't know if it's Taylor Rotunda. But it really looks like a Rotunda in a skeleton outfit. That's the first thing that I thought of. Now, this photo is laid down on a mat that is completely surrounded by those symbols that we've seen as this Nightbird stuff has continued on and on. And there's a voice behind it as the camera is zooming in on this photograph. It's the voice is going, "Look at this photograph." I'm just kidding. Can you imagine? Somebody's got to remix it with Nickelback. The camera is zooming in, and there's a robotic voice behind it. And the robotic voice is saying, "He is nobody. He is all of us." And then it says, "Do you want to meet him?" And then we see some footage from the end of the Twitch stream. And then and if you know, kind of go frame by frame, you can see that there's all kinds of stuff that they're showing at the end of this video. It's that footage from the end of the Twitch stream where you see the therapist. There is also, so on Raw, there was a wide shot of the arena at one point. And if you look at that wide shot, and you can find the picture all over Twitter, but if you look at that wide shot, if you zoom in, you don't even really have to zoom in. There's a spotlight that is on what appears to be some kind of figure. It's like a darkened arena, and then there's what looks like it's a bluish spotlight, and it's on this figure. And there's debate as to whether that figure is a veiled woman. It could be a Sister Abigail type of person, whether it was Uncle Howdy himself, whether it could be something that had nothing to do with this at all. It could have just been an oddly lit thing and a security guard sitting there. Nobody knows 100% for sure. But it was acknowledged in this thing. You could see a picture of that screen grab from Monday Night Raw that had everybody talking. Now, this could either mean, yes, that was us right there on Raw, or it could mean we're watching you as you try to interpret this. Because they've done many things throughout this process, whether it's, and we talked about it on the podcast, whether it's acknowledging certain like Twitter and Reddit users in the metadata by username. Like there are multiple instances throughout this Nightbird thing of internet sleuths being acknowledged in the next QR code. So I'm not convinced that that was necessarily them admitting, yes, that was us, or it was them saying, hey, we saw that you thought this was us. That's not clarified to me. There was a YouTube channel, I think it's called C Wrestling, that does a great job breaking all this stuff down. And C Wrestling was the first one that I said saw the URL. And I saw the URL, it was 22423, except they saw it as 22423. And if you go to February 24th, 2023, that was the last Firefly Funhouse vignette that ever aired. And Uncle Howdy is in that vignette. He's like a weather reporter or something like that. And then I also saw that the number 4.7.14 shows up on a screen with like static in the background. And I saw one person, they counted it. They said 4 plus 7 is, well, now you're going to make me do math, 11. Plus 14 is 25, May 25th, King of the Ring. I said, I don't know, but then why would they structure it as a date? Well, if you Google 4/7/14, you see that is a date of an episode of Monday Night Raw. And on YouTube, it's still up there, I believe, that it is when they started running the vignettes that Bo Dallas and the Bo Leave campaign was coming to Monday Night Raw. And I think that's what this is all about, because if you look at the beginning of the Uncle Howdy Twitch stream that went up, they were airing clips from this episode of Monday Night Raw, this random episode of Monday Night Raw, where they have Vicky Guerrero and Brad Maddox in the ring, and then Kane comes out. But if you do some searching, you realize that episode of Raw and that segment with Kane in it was the Monday Night Raw debut of the Wyatt family. So that was Bray's first time on Monday Night Raw. So the idea that we would now see Bo cite one of the first Raws that aired a Bo Leave vignette is not out of the realm of possibility for me to believe. So I think that is where the 4/7/14 comes in. And then there is this weird like still of like a forearm, and you see kind of a sleeve of a shirt. But anybody that watched the New Generation era of WWE, and I watched the New Generation era of WWE, could see that picture. This is the type of psychosis that I deal with. Immediately when I saw that picture, I was like, that's Waylon Mercy. Like, there was no Googling. There was no interpretation needed. I didn't have to check Twitter accounts. I didn't have to check YouTube channels. I just immediately go like, not only is it Waylon Mercy, but I can picture in my head when Waylon Mercy is just kind of sitting there going like, lives are going to be in Waylon Mercy's hands. Know what I mean? I mean, I loved Waylon Mercy. I had not even seen Cape Fear, the De Niro version of Cape Fear that Scorsese did, which is what Waylon Mercy is based on. I hadn't even seen that movie, and I thought Waylon Mercy was great. Just a Southern con man coming to the ring and shaking hands with everybody, shaking hands with the referee, shaking hands with his opponent, and then he would beat his opponent into the ground. It was based on Max Cady, who was the villain in the Martin Scorsese version of the movie Cape Fear. So the reason that would be there is, of course, number one, Waylon Mercy is the namesake of Mercy the Buzzard. That's why he's called Mercy. That's why he's got the Hawaiian shirt on. And number two, the reason Mercy the Buzzard exists is because the original Bray Wyatt character in the Hawaiian shirt felt like it drew a lot of inspiration from Waylon Mercy, to the point where Wyndham, the performer, went to Dan Spivey, who played the character of Waylon Mercy, and talked to him about Bray Wyatt and got the blessing of Dan Spivey before he started doing all this Bray Wyatt stuff. So it would make sense that would be there just as an acknowledgement that this is all part of that extended universe, because ultimately every bit of Bray Wyatt from Husky Harris, this is a very unique situation, that this whole character of Bray Wyatt includes Husky Harris. You know, most of the time, Bray debuts as Husky Harris, and then he goes away, and then he comes back as Bray Wyatt, right? But Bray Wyatt as a character was meant to be taken in such reality that Husky Harris had to become part of the past of not only Wyndham Rotunda, who's playing Bray Wyatt, but Husky Harris actually became the past of Bray Wyatt, to the point where Bray continues to evolve. The character is acknowledging everything that Wyndham went through, because Wyndham and the character are the same. So if this Uncle Howdy thing is connected to Bray Wyatt, everything that Wyndham as a human being went through is part of that Wyatt universe. And that would be, I would imagine, where Waylon Mercy fits in. I am very hopeful that this week on Raw and on SmackDown, I'm ready for these QR codes to have that date back in it, because I get very nervous, right? Because we got that date, but then since we got that date, I feel like we've had other dates, but they push to like dates that stuff happened in the past, dates that are important to the history of whatever this entity is. But I want the date again. I want them to go like, yeah, we haven't changed our mind. It's still going to be King and Queen of the Ring. You know, I'm really hoping on Raw there's some kind of like countdown that says, you know, we'll be here in 5 days. I'm really hoping on SmackDown we get something that says like, see you tomorrow. Because don't forget, SmackDown's going to be from Saudi Arabia, the same spot as King and Queen of the Ring. I think it's for the first time ever that they're actually doing both shows there. So I'm very hopeful that that's what we get. I'm very hopeful that we get within the next week some pinpoint clarification. Yes, this is where we'll be. So tune in, because if we got Uncle Howdy coming to this King and Queen of the Ring pay-per-view, I am even more locked in than I was before. And I am locked in. Now, we questioned last week here on Notsam Wrestling what the deal was going to be with Cody Rhodes and Logan Paul. You know, it was, and they were very smart about this, that they never said on television that it was going to be title for title. So when Logan Paul was able to duck out of it and say it was because he used his lawyers, it wasn't like they ever did any false advertising. It wasn't like there was ever a bait and switch, because only Cody said both titles will be on the line. Cody said in the promo, I want to be the United States champion. Cody said on Twitter, Cody 2 belts. But the idea was that Cody got tricked, but that Logan Paul was never going to do this. So Logan Paul comes out and Cody Rhodes comes out and they get to the ring. And I thought it was awesome. Not only did Cody, you know, he gave a little wink to Jacksonville, going like, I know Jacksonville. Everybody knows what he's talking about, right? Little AEW history and everything. But he brings up the history of wrestling in Jacksonville, which I love that Cody does this. I love that Cody is not just there for fans of now. Cody is there for the fans that have always been fans, because Cody is a full acknowledger of the fact that he is a wrestling fan. And Cody brings up the 1992 War Games match with the Dangerous Alliance and the Stinger Squadron, which up until, I would say, maybe 2022 was my favorite War Games match too. I had not seen, even including all the NXT War Games matches, and there were some really, really good ones. 1992 War Games was everything War Games should be. It was just, it's a perfect match. I recommend you go on Peacock and watch it as soon as you get the opportunity to. But I would probably argue that the 2022 Bloodline War Games match might be even better. And ironically, who is the person that is on the outside of the double cage for both the 1992 and the 2022 War Games match? In 1992, the Dangerous Alliance was led by Paul Heyman as he was at ringside. And 30 years later, he did it again for the Bloodline. And again, you know, maybe that one might be my favorite War Games match. It was just peak Bloodline. And we'll get into more Bloodline stuff in a couple of minutes. But he talked about being a fan, and he brought it forward to today and talking about Logan Paul. And he called Logan Paul a tourist. He said that Logan Paul was here to just, you know, get that clout, do a couple of big moves, get some attention, but then he'd be gone. And Logan Paul, I loved Logan Paul's response, honestly, to Cody Rhodes, going like, I've heard that before. I keep hearing that. Every time somebody gets in here with me, they tell me that I'm an outsider. They tell me that I don't belong. They tell me I'm not a real WWE superstar. And what happens? Every single time I beat them. And he's right. You know, the stuff that Cody was saying about him being an outsider, not only is it stuff that we've heard before, but if you really talk to wrestling fans about Logan Paul, the fact is, with every performance, fans are getting more and more accepting of him. Logan Paul is not in the celebrity. First of all, the tolerance of celebrity wrestling fans and celebrities becoming pro wrestlers has increased dramatically. There was a time when it really was a waste. There was a time when David Arquette felt like it ruined his life because everybody was so disgusted with the fact that he was WCW champion. But now, if you really talk to wrestling fans, most wrestling fans think that it's not a question of if, but when. That it's an inevitability that Logan Paul will be WWE champion someday. A lot that I talk to anyway. A lot of wrestling fans that I talk to feel like the United States Championship is for now, but Logan Paul eventually will be WWE champion. And most of the wrestling fans that I've spoken to, when they say that, they don't say it with dread. They say it with acceptance. That maybe when he first debuted, maybe when he was doing his stuff with The Miz, maybe that they'd be like, ugh. But now they go like, yeah, no, he'll probably be champion one day. And it's because of his performances. I love this pairing between Cody and Logan Paul because Cody is such the wrestling good guy, and Logan Paul is he's a perfect villain. You gotta boo him. And I really liked the way they handled the why. Because there was a time when you would just have Cody and Logan Paul and they'd go, yeah, but it's just going to be for the WWE Championship. It's not going to be for the United States Championship just because. Now they're making it a part of the story where Logan Paul shows up with that whole entourage and they've all got Prime suits, T-shirts on, and that goofy lawyer is with him and he's got that bad suit on. And it's like that does feel like something celebrity Logan Paul would do. He'd need to have an entourage with him. He'd need to have a lawyer with him. And honestly, the idea that we've gone through as many contract signings as we've gone through, and no wrestler ever brings a lawyer to the ring? Who signs a contract without a lawyer present? You don't even have a lawyer look over it? You just have Nick Aldis go, hey, it's the main event of the pay-per-view. Here you go. Here's your contract. I would imagine if Cody had brought a lawyer, the lawyer would probably say, whoa, there's a little stip missing from this. The United States Championship doesn't appear to be on the line. Would your client care to comment? That's never happened. No wrestler brings a lawyer to the ring. It's very odd for a professional contract signing. But Logan brings a lawyer to the ring, and he goes, hey, I don't know what kind of shenanigans, and he changed it up on him, right? And Logan Paul being that sort of new, young entrepreneur guy, he would do something like this. He would have this thing where it's like, hey, I don't know, this is in my contract. I don't know what you're trying to pull here, and stick a little clause in there, right? Because he's got power, because he's a celebrity coming in, and he's going to use it. So he goes, yeah, my title's not on the line. I told you I wasn't going to defend this title. It's not. I don't know why you're getting so excited about it. It's not on the line. And, I felt like it still left a little not quite confirmed, but it's pretty clear. Logan Paul has a stipulation in his deal. He's not defending the United States Championship. This is just going to be a WWE Championship match. Now, I think that is ultimately a good thing, because if both titles were on the line, I could just about guarantee you a Shamazola, some kind of disqualification thing, some kind of no contest, something where in the main event of the pay-per-view, both guys get to leave with their titles, and you don't want that for the main event of a pay-per-view. Now, if the Uncle Howdy crew is coming at King and Queen of the Ring, I've got to believe it's going to be a main event thing. And it feels like an evil force to me. It doesn't feel like good guys. The way Bray was not quite evil, you know what I mean? He was getting dark, but he hadn't quite gotten there. He was kind of a babyface. So I think that Cody will be their target. And I feel like now this gives us the opportunity that Cody can beat Logan Paul clean. And then while he's celebrating, that's when we can get boom, boom, boom. All the lights can go off kind of one section at a time. And we can do our thing. And that's when this new stable can finally show themselves. And we can maybe build a program with Cody. Now, that does make me feel a little bit iffy because I don't think you're going to take the title off Cody anytime soon. And if this means that Cody's going to beat them in their first major program, it always makes me nervous about where it's going to go, but I'm willing to let him cook. I just see that as that's a big ending for a pay-per-view, and it also gives us Cody doesn't have a story right now. Cody doesn't have a story that lends itself to going through the summer. I think that's what we have to look at. That to me, King and Queen of the Ring is kind of the end of post-WrestleMania figuring things out, right? We've got our new champions. They've defended their titles. The draft is over, cemented, done. And we've got a King and Queen of the Ring. So now we're not looking back to WrestleMania. We're looking forward. We're looking forward to the summer and what are going to be the stories told through the summer and what is going to take us to SummerSlam and then Bash at Berlin at the end of August. And I do think that an Uncle Howdy-led faction haunting Cody Rhodes could be, if done correctly, a good story to tell through the summer. Now, as I talk about stories, I do think that we are going to have to acknowledge that you can't keep doing the Logan Paul is an outsider story. People are not going to keep buying it because while he is that kind of celebrity, WWE has also done a really good job of showing off that he's doing the work. Every interview with everybody that's worked with Logan Paul, they put him over as a guy who's actually put the work in. Every trainer that's dealt with him, the vibe on Logan is that he's a legit WWE guy. And so I do kind of think that if you want to keep Logan Paul a villain, I kind of feel like the best thing that you could do is bring some of this internet hate that he's got onto the show. Like if you go through and look at the drama that he's got online all the time, whether it's like NFT stuff or whether it's the stuff that's going on his podcast. Like if you had a wrestler that he's in a rivalry with, if you had LA Knight name drop like somebody that Logan is beefing with on the internet, well, now you've got the internet talking about it. Now you've got the people that make these, I hate Logan Paul videos going, oh my God, they're talking about this thing that we're talking about on the WWE. Now you're getting that internet audience. You're not just getting Logan Paul's fans. You're also getting Logan Paul's enemies. And that's a big part of the Paul brothers business is that you make money off the fans and the haters, which is wrestling to a T. Whether they're paying to see you win or paying to see you lose, they're paying to see you. And that's what it's all about. And I think that as wrestling fans come to realize that, like, I don't really even see Logan Paul as so much of an outsider anymore. Logan Paul is I look forward to his matches. He's awesome in the ring. Let's bring in some of that internet hate and go like, okay, all right, let's cook with this for a little while. And also, not only will you get the internet then going, hey, you got to talk about, Logan Paul's hearing this on WWE SmackDown as well, but you'll also get this feeling, it'll feel more real. The tension will feel like there's real tension. I don't like you, and I don't like that you're here. Like if somebody goes, Logan, I don't like that you're here in WWE. And the reason that I don't like that you're here, and Logan will say, I've heard this before. And then you could say, yeah, but you haven't heard it. You haven't heard why. I don't think you're an outsider. I think you've taken to this like a fish to water. I think you're doing some of the best work that we've got on the roster. Your matches are a real highlight to any show that you're on. I don't like that you're here because you're a bad person. I mean, go over that Kendrick Drake verse. Here's why I don't like you. and like start disliking Logan Paul for the reasons that people outside of wrestling aren't fans of him, and bring that in. And I think you might have something real cool there. The new Bloodline, as our Bloodline turns, the new Bloodline is a big part of the King of the Ring. And a part of me wonders, I didn't think Tanga, until I was thinking about it today. I went, well, Tama Tonga is not going to win the King of the Ring, but maybe he should, right? Because I do think that the natural instinct is that it's Gunther versus Randy Orton in the King of the Ring final. I think Gunther versus Randy Orton is a main event level match anywhere in the world. Gunther versus Randy Orton is a fantasy booking type of match. And if you are legitimately trying to crown a king of this roster, having a match between Randy Orton and Gunther to decide that is kind of what it's all about. But then I also was like, well, as I'm looking at that, I go, that's almost too perfect. But also, don't forget, they teased Gunther versus Ilya. And I think most of us were like, of course they're going to do Gunther versus Ilya. And then they didn't. And then over on SmackDown, they kind of teased the idea of, oh, we could do Bianca versus Jade. That would be sick. But then they didn't. And historically, that is kind of what the King of the Ring is all about. That when you look at the potential matches, some of them you get, and always some of them you don't. I can't help but wonder if we want to get, as I was saying before, as we're getting into the summer and where all these stories are going to go, the new bloodline needs to really find their footing. Who are they? What are they? And what is motivating them? It's one thing to kind of have this launching pad rivalry with Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. It's great. They had a great match. It's awesome. But what is the purpose of the new bloodline? We're getting to the point where it's like, okay, it's time to get to the bottom of that. Jey Uso beating Gunther would be great for Jey Uso, and I don't think would do a lick of bad for Gunther. I think if Jey Uso were able to squeak one by Gunther, and you're looking through that dude's career, and it's like Sami Zayn was able to get one on him, and Jey Uso was able to get one on him. And those are the two guys that got one on him. And then you could even go, and now going forward, you've got this idea where at some point, whether it's even at Bash in Berlin, or it could be a SummerSlam match, or it could be anything, the idea of a rematch between Jey Uso and Gunther, a rubber match, because Gunther beat Jey Uso in the Intercontinental Championship match. Then Jey Uso beats Gunther in the semifinals of the King of the Ring. Now we can go to a rubber match, and Jey Uso versus Gunther is a big, big deal. I also think, momentum ain't slow behind Jey Uso. People love that dude. And the fact that he's on Raw, and he was drafted to Raw, and he's permanently on Raw, he is always going to be in question as to where he stands with the bloodline. Randy Orton versus Tama Tonga is happening on SmackDown on Friday. There's no reason why the bloodline couldn't interfere and cost Randy Orton that match. Again, Randy would lose nothing. And I would argue that at this point, if Tama lost to Randy Orton, it might be tough for the bloodline to recover. And even though you'd only have one day to prepare for it, and even though, to be fair, if Jey Uso beat Gunther, we would kind of know coming off of Raw that in all likelihood, Tama Tonga is going to beat Randy Orton. That seems to be where the match would go. Once we got there, doing Jey Uso versus Tama Tonga might be the way to go. And having Tama Tonga beat Jey Uso might be the way to go. Because I really think that this bloodline needs to become a major, major threat. The idea is that at some point Roman Reigns is going to come back. And the fans are chanting, we want Roman, we want Roman, we want Roman. I don't remember a time where he has had more support behind him. So when he comes back, you can't have him with a group that fans feel like he may be able to steamroll. Well, if Tama Tonga is the king of the ring and is able to beat Jey Uso, especially you give Jey Uso that big victory over Gunther, and even that Jey Uso gets beat by Tama Tonga, maybe now you have a threat. He went viral, Tama Tonga, because he went full, I'm Cornholio, I need TP for my bunghole Beavis on SmackDown. It was wild. But I do, as much as I don't know if we keep doing those exact sounds, I do think that there's something scary about a Tama Tonga that doesn't talk. I do think there's something scary about a Tama Tonga that relates more to an animal than a human being. And I like the idea of Solo Sikoa suddenly switching roles. That Solo Sikoa was just the silent but deadly enforcer, wearing a t-shirt and gripping his taped up thumb, ready to spike it into someone's neck. And now he's borrowed the Weekend's jacket, and he's the one calling the shots. He's the one putting his enforcers in to do the dirty work. And I do think that he's one of these rare cases where he's the mouthpiece and he's sending the enforcers in to do the dirty work. But ultimately, if he has to step in and do it himself, that's something that you don't want. I think that that's the role that we want for Solo. But I think you need to see Solo get some big victories. I think you need to see Tama Tonga get some big victories. And I think you need to see Tonga Loa mess some people up. I think you've really got to see this new bloodline become a dominant force. And I think it's really important that this new bloodline, like, mess people up without having to cheat all the time. That should be the difference. To me, if you want to make people feel like, oh, this bloodline's more dangerous, because Roman's bloodline was strategic. Roman's bloodline used the numbers. Roman's bloodline took advantage of the rules. Roman's bloodline wasn't afraid to win by technicality. This bloodline doesn't need any of that. This bloodline just steamrolls over people. And I think that that's the feeling that you want, so that when Roman does come back, it's not a bloodline he's necessarily ready to compete with. Yeah, I think that something is going on with Roman, because multiple Roman matches were uploaded to the WWE's YouTube channel. They put up his TLC match with AJ Styles, or I think it was TLC match, but then they also put up his TLC 2019 match with Baron Corbin. And I'm sure part of it is because it was TLC the July paper or the May pay-per-view at one point. I think it was the pay-per-view that used to follow Backlash. And so I'm sure they're just these are just good TLC matches. But the fact that they put up the Corbin match, I definitely feel as though that was the last match before Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania that Roman actually lost. Corbin won that match. And so the idea that you're putting that match up, I definitely think lends to building up Baron Corbin a little bit, which is a good thing, and also may kind of stoke the flames of Roman Reigns being a babyface. And maybe it'll get people thinking I'm ready to cheer for him. I'd like to cheer for him now. Well, we don't know where they'll be cheering for him. He wasn't drafted, of course, but we did get some interesting information. You know, the networks, this is now we're getting into network business. This isn't so much storyline stuff, but still important for us fans, because there's been conversation in some circles of wrestling fans where we all pay attention to those details. We watch the product, but we want to know where we can watch the product and when we can watch the product. Those are the 3 rules, after all. Watch the product, speculate wildly, and everything counts. And at the network upfronts and the news that all the networks were putting out, in the last couple weeks, it was announced that the CW, as we know, is getting NXT in the fall. NXT is leaving USA and going over to the CW. Well, apparently it's not moving its time, as NXT has been slotted into the Tuesday time slot. The CW said they were going to have NXT on Tuesdays. So NXT is not moving. And then I'm checking the date, double checking. Yes, USA, who is getting SmackDown in the fall. A lot of people thought they were getting SmackDown in October, but as it turns out, they're getting it a little bit earlier. USA is advertising that SmackDown will be returning to USA and that the new SmackDown will premiere on September 13th. Noteworthy because it's earlier than originally expected and because September 13th is a Friday. So it would appear that USA is keeping SmackDown on Fridays. Now, when Netflix signed Monday Night Raw, first of all, during the TV negotiation process, Nick Khan and WWE officials were saying that when it comes to selling the rights to this television show, we don't know what day it'll be on. Maybe it'll be out on Monday, maybe on another day. That's not something that we're locked onto necessarily. But when Netflix signed the deal, all of the press releases said that Netflix was signing a deal for WWE Raw. It did not say WWE Monday Night Raw. However, two things. Number one, I'm sure because WWE also signed a mini deal with USA because Raw was up, the TV rights for Raw were up at the same time as NXT and as SmackDown, meaning that in the fall, Raw needed a new home. Well, they signed a micro deal with USA so that for the remainder of 2024, Raw will still be on USA, and I'm sure that USA will keep it on Mondays just to maintain the regularity of that schedule. Why would you move it if it's only going to be out for another 3 months? But with SmackDown staying on Friday, with NXT staying on Tuesday, I don't know. Maybe Raw stays on Monday. I think that there was speculation that it might be moved because anybody that looks at these ratings knows that it gets tough in the fall. And the reason it gets tough in the fall is because every single Monday in the fall, Monday Night Raw is competing with Monday Night Football, which, it's everybody watches Monday Night Football. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Netflix is a global company and that Netflix globally bought the TV rights for Monday Night Raw. It's not just the American rights. It's the rights everywhere. So I would think that the live feed will go out everywhere at the same time, which means that they're not just trying to satiate the American audience that watches Monday Night Football. They're also trying to satiate the Canadian audience and the audience in Europe and the audiences all over the place. So I don't know. I would imagine the one live feed will go live across all of them. And maybe the Monday Night Football thing isn't such a big deal because it's a global stream. At the same time, how do they count their numbers? Is the live viewership essential to USA? I believe on Peacock, they count the 24-hour numbers, which is why when an international PLE is on, they're not so concerned with how many people are watching it. Like when they did the Australia show, Elimination Chamber, what I read was that Peacock wasn't so concerned with how many people were watching live as much as the 24-hour period. Meaning that if you watch it later in the day when you wake up, if you decide to turn it on a Saturday night at a regular time it would be on, that's all still in the same 24-hour window that they're really counting. So if it's a 24-hour thing for Netflix and it goes up on demand immediately after the live airing, which I don't even know if they're getting the library for Raw. I have no idea. But maybe that's it. I don't know. It's going to get very, very interesting, though, very, very quickly. Of course, we've also got Double or Nothing happening, and we're not going to do full previews for either King and Queen of the Ring or Double or Nothing here on this week's show. Maybe there'll be another show later in the week or the Patreon show or whatever. But what I'm most intrigued by for Double or Nothing is what main events that show. Because you've got, I don't think Anarchy in the Arena will main event the show. But you've got some big matches, right? You've got, they called it a triple main event show, but realistically, it's like you got Swerve versus Christian, which in my opinion should be the main event. but hasn't necessarily been treated like the main event on week-to-week television. You've got Mercedes Moné versus Willow for the TBS championship. Could be a main event. You've got Anarchy in the Arena, which generally speaking, you'd think, no, that's not the main event, but you're talking about Team AEW versus Team Elite. As far as storylines go, that's a main event storyline if I've ever heard one in my life. That's an invasion story. And then you've also got this barbed wire steel cage match, which I don't think will be the main event, but Adam Copeland versus Malachi Black in a barbed wire steel cage. It's a giant match with two big stars in a barbed wire steel cage. So I think realistically, you can probably narrow it down to two. You can probably narrow it down to the TBS title and the AEW World title. And I guess, I don't know. I mean, if it's me, I feel like Swerve beating Christian and Swerve holding up the title at the end of the night is how you want to go out on pay-per-view. And I say that because Mercedes appears to be a villain. She appears to be a heel. She took the big table bump on Dynamite this week. The way she was talking to Willow, she seemed like she was a villain. Now, maybe, and I would think she's going to win the title, right? That's what it seems like. It would seem like this is all being set up for Mercedes to get her win back against Willow Nightingale. Unless you've got some big signing. I mean, you could have Britt Baker returning or something. Like, unless there's something big happening that is going to push a Mercedes storyline forward, it really feels like the move has got to be Swerve beating Christian and holding up that title victoriously as your bow out. I don't know for sure, but it'll be interesting to see. I do think that Mercedes will win the title, and yeah, there are a lot of things that could happen, right? You could have Willow attack Mercedes after the match and go nuts, and Willow turns heel. You could have Chris Statlander turn on Willow after Willow loses, right? Like, Mercedes celebrates, leaves the ring with the title. Willow sits up upset. The crowd cheers. Chris goes in to console her and then beats her down. Chris Statlander turns on Willow. And then Stokely stays with Chris. Or you could have, Mercedes, tell him to get the hell out of her ring. She's celebrating, and then Britt Baker comes back. And then your big go-home is Britt Baker and Mercedes kind of staring off at each other, which I feel like is the big match, right? I don't know. But do any of those feel bigger than your babyface champion conquering one of the biggest heels in the company? I don't know. I guess we'll have a better idea when we watch Dynamite this week. I don't know, but I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love to hear what you know. This is another thing that has been a very welcome addition to Notsam Wrestling here as we celebrate our 500th episode, is the inclusion of the email segment. You can email us, notsamwrestling@gmail.com. That's notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Don't email any other address because I won't get them. notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Let's see who from my email box gets the great honor and esteem of making it onto the 500th episode of Notsam Wrestling. Don't forget, we'll be celebrating all 500 episodes and then some, plus the upcoming 10-year anniversary of the show in Cleveland, Thursday, August 1st at 7:30 p.m. That's at Hilarities. You can go to notsam.com for tickets. Gran writes in, Sam, I just realized something. Before Rock pins Cody on night one, he does one specific taunt right before the people's elbow. What does that taunt resemble? That's right, the Undertaker's taunt. Different fingers, but same movement. Anyways, now that that story is finished, do you think that this moment is superior to the Undertaker's streak ending? No. I mean, no, it will never be. I mean, you're talking about one moment is one that every fan looked at in dismay, And another moment is one that every fan looked at in complete and utter happiness. Like, the Undertaker's streak ending is the polar opposite of the story ending. You know, I mean, that's a happy ending versus a sad ending. It's two totally separate things. Both huge moments, but both evoke completely different emotions. I guess if you're going to scale up biggest moments in WrestleMania, I don't know, what are you basing it on? If it's shock, no. There will never be a bigger shock than Brock Lesnar beating Undertaker. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody. So that's not going to be, I mean, I didn't think Roman was going to lose. Some people did, some people didn't. But the idea of Roman winning was not even half of the given that The Undertaker beating Brock Lesnar was. There was no way Brock was going to win that match. It just wasn't going to happen. It doesn't happen at WrestleMania. The whole match was built to add credibility to the streak. So when the streak ended, you went, what? Yeah, no way. Cade writes in, you replied to my email about Mount Rushmore's correctly. So my reply to that is a Mount Rushmore done correctly. To represent the birth of wrestling, Hulk Hogan. I can buy it. To represent the growth, Stone Cold, because he led the... Yeah, I'll buy it. Cena could represent the development because he helped with the new title design. Well, yeah, I mean, and also just how far he went. I buy it. And then for preservation, you can go with Triple H. Yeah, I mean, I buy that. I buy all of those, and does not make me mad. That is a far more proper Mount Rushmore than any I've ever heard. I would probably say you can't put, for my rules, I would say you can't put Triple H on the Mount Rushmore because he's in charge now. I feel like once you're in charge, you can't be on the Mount Rushmore with performers because it's not equal parts. You know what I mean? But that's just my own rules. That's not Mount Rushmore rules. That's Sam Mount Rushmore rules. So I'm not going to get mad about that. Ben writes in, for the first time on episode 500, became a fan of yours during the build-up to WrestleMania 40. Loved your emergency pods. Hope you loved the one this week. I've been a fan of WWE on and off since I was 6 years old. Now I'm 25. Big time, baby. 19 beautiful, glorious years. Except for the years that you didn't watch. Those years stunk. I got back into it for the first time in 5 years. Those 5 years must have been awful when Cody Rhodes returned. This is why I said Cody Rhodes is the start of this era, by the way. Triple H reeled me right back in. I can't stop watching the product. You should never stop watching the product. My question revolves around Uncle Howdy's return, and I hope it makes sense to you what I'm trying to say. Do you think Uncle Howdy is going to be the full character mask in everything, or do you think we will ever see an unmasking of Uncle Howdy and he becomes a sort of split personality of Bo's? Also, I think Uncle Howdy comes back as a personality of Bo's. He should come back as Bo Wyatt instead of Bo Dallas. What do you think? Well, it's not like crazy by any stretch. But I don't think that I think it could work, and I don't think it's bad. I don't even think Bo Wyatt versus Bo Dallas. I don't think any of that's bad. I do, however, feel as though, as a character, Bo Dallas is not beloved the way Bray Wyatt was beloved. In order for a dual personality to work, you have to be equally interested in both of the personalities. Meaning, The Fiend was so cool, but people already loved Bray Wyatt so much. So if Bray didn't show up as The Fiend, you were still happy to see Bray. When Bray showed up as himself, you were still happy to see Bray. Can you get me to the point where Bo Dallas is equally compelling as Uncle Howdy? If you can, then they can be dual personalities. If you can't, I don't know that it will work. I feel more like it'll be the Uncle Howdy that we saw, which is the mask is kind of ever evolving. That sometimes it was that mask that didn't move at all. Sometimes it was the more wooden mask. Sometimes it was the mask with hair coming off of it and everything. I think Uncle Howdy can take different forms. I think we could even see Bo Dallas in face paint because he's got to wrestle at some point, right? Maybe a face paint or something that resembles an Uncle Howdy. But I think it should be a character. I think it should be a single character that we know is Bo Dallas, but that character can evolve depending on the situation that he's in, if that makes sense. Appreciate the email. Fred writes in for the 500th weekly podcast. I loved listening to your breakdown of Uncle Howdy's breakdown. I guess so. I guess Uncle Howdy was having a breakdown. It was definitely a fun time. We've all been thinking that the release of the excellent Bray Wyatt documentary was the beginning of whatever is coming. But what it started was the beginning of whatever is coming, but what it started beforehand. As a loyal Notsam Wrestling listener, allow me to apply our 3 guiding commandments to this theory that I have. Oh, you must be talking about watching the product, speculating wildly, and everything counts? I watch the product religiously. That's number 1. Okay. Allow me to speculate wildly. Okay. Nikki Cross has been rumored to be a part of whatever incarnation is coming from these vignettes, right? If you remember last year, Nikki got into these weird drifting off catatonic states, where I think it was a fugue state, where she would leave partners standing on the apron in a trance, etc. Nothing ever came of that, and she eventually stopped appearing on television. It's possible she was coming under the influence of Howdy or whoever at that point already, but they were making their presence known. And 3, and even if that is not right, of course, in this new era, everything counts. Thanks, Fred. Yeah, I think it's hard to retcon and say, because you could say, right, Dexter Lumis has also been rumored to be a part of this Uncle Howdy group. And you could be like, a lot of the Dexter Lumis stuff never really went anywhere. Why was he acting so crazy? Well, he was also under Uncle Howdy's spell. I don't think that that's the move for me personally. I feel more like the idea that these characters were just dropped. The idea that Nikki Cross was just having these difficult times and nobody cared. They just dropped her and allowed her to be forgotten about. I think that is more of the Uncle Howdy thing. And the same thing with Dexter Lumis. John writes in, long time, first time. My sister is friends with actor Paul Walter Hauser. I'm a big Paul Walter Hauser guy myself. And he invited her to an AEW show at the Forum in Los Angeles. This is her first ever wrestling event. I also have never been. Wow. Despite being a 46-year-old lifelong fan, what are some tips you would tell someone who's going to his or for her first event? Thanks. Man, what a fun thing that is to be going to your first event. I feel like just allow yourself to take everything in. Don't get lost in what your role is. Don't get lost in what you're supposed to be chanting. Don't get lost in how you're supposed to be reacting. There is nothing for me like getting to an arena and sitting down in my seat and just seeing the ring and taking in the whole environment. I absolutely love it. And there are some shows, by the way, where I'm losing my mind and you can see me in the crowd losing my mind. And there are other shows where I'm sitting quietly and I am equally enjoying myself both ways, because I do not enjoy my product to anyone's standards other than my own. I think that the best thing that you can do for going to your first live show is to just let it hit you emotionally and just respond however you respond. Just allow your body to go on that emotional ride. Don't overthink anything. Just feel what you feel, watching what you watch, and express yourself. And you'll never go wrong at a wrestling show. Let's go to Dylan. Hey, Sam, big fan. Just wondering your thoughts on if Logan Paul loses at King Queen of the Ring, if you think a Money in the Bank win is possible with a cash-in at SummerSlam in Cleveland. I can't imagine they would have Cody lose his belt this quickly into his run. But do you think a heavyweight cash-in is possible? WWE has listed him as a free agent, so just wishfully thinking, for my prime, I'll chief. Also, heard you tell another email, hope he goes to Michigan State or Syracuse. What's your alliance with Michigan State? Go green. My dad went to Michigan State, so I'll always support State because my dad loves him some Michigan State. So my dad went to Michigan State. I went to Syracuse. I don't hate that idea, to tell you the truth. I like the idea of Logan losing, and then here comes this faction to haunt Cody. Cody gets haunted. He goes into Clash at the Castle still being haunted. Logan Paul wins Money in the Bank. Now he's the United States champion and the Money in the Bank briefcase holder. And maybe he faces LA Knight at SummerSlam, loses, and then later in the night cashes in on Cody and gets the title from Cody. Because Cody could win it back a month later. You know what I mean? Logan doesn't have to have a long title run. But the idea of Logan losing the title in Cleveland and then winning the title in Cleveland, I don't hate it. I would have to really start kind of breaking down how that would work and everything, and whether Logan should lose it in a month or whether he should have it for a little bit longer. I mean, what's after? They have another pay-per-view Bash in Berlin later in August. Maybe Logan won't give Cody a shot. Maybe we do Logan versus Gunther at Bash in Berlin. I don't know. There's a lot to go with there, but I wouldn't mind Logan Paul winning the Money in the Bank briefcase and being the United States champion. Darren writes in, I love how trying to headbutt Samoans is still a thing after like 35 years. I remember wrestlers trying to headbutt the Islanders back in the day. Samoans and Tongans, by the way, because Haku could not be headbutted, and he's a Tongan. And the Islanders were Haku and the Tanga Kid, of course, being a Samoan. So, and the Head Shrinkers you couldn't headbutt. The Wild Samoans you couldn't headbutt. So, yeah, I don't know if you could headbutt Yokozuna or not, because I don't know if once he took Japan as his homeland, if he still got the benefits of the Samoan head. I loved how Ilya Dragunov attempted to torpedo the torpedo. Oh, yeah. To torpedo Moscow on Jey Uso's head and injured his hand. It's the little things. Well, I think also don't forget they'd been working on the arm the whole match. So I don't think that was just Jey Uso's Samoan head, but it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt him. It hurt Ilya, that's for sure. Uncle Timmy in Philly writes in, what's up, my dude? I've been with you since the O&A days. Now that's a long time. Thanks for kicking off my WrestleMania staycation with a blast at Helium. Come out to Cleveland, dude. First time emailer because it's the first time I felt compelled to let you know an opinion. Do you think creative is going to present the possibility of time travel with the Uncle Howdy faction? Hear me out, he says. Oh, Uncle Timmy, I don't know if I like this time travel stuff. Kushida would be mad. If they didn't let Kushida time travel, I don't think. From the line from the earlier QR code, hell is only a word. Reality is much, much worse. It's from the sci-fi horror movie Event Horizon. Yes, I think we talked about that, which dealt with time-dimensional travel. Right. You brought up the unlikelihood of how a floppy disk, a thumb drive, and a VHS being used at the same time was. Yes. I've been watching the product since pre-WrestleMania 2. My guy. And I can't recall a concept like this ever being done. And if creative can pull it off, it would be mind-blowing storytelling. Too much of a reach? Let me know. Can't wait for the lights to go out at King and Queen of the Ring and for the crowd to lose their minds when Nightbird plays. I don't know if Nightbird will play, because don't forget, White Rabbit was not Bray's song. So Nightbird might not be this group's song. It might just be their calling card right now. Time travel will be tough, man. I don't know if they want to go full Event Horizon. I felt like my explanation of it being more just the sacrifice that we saw in Event Horizon was it. Also, that would explain the varied technologies on the table. I think time travel would be tough. That said, I mean, it's not like there hasn't been elements of interdimensional play before, like Undertaker Kane universe, Bray Wyatt universe, Matt Hardy universe. There have been stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense in this dimension. I could see interdimensional more than time travel, personally. And I'll bet you'd be satisfied if they did interdimensional well. It'd be tough. It's a live medium. Nick writes in, Sam, I'm worried, and I need you to provide the historical wrestling references to make it make sense. If Uncle Howdy / the Nightbird stuff is supposed to be taken very seriously and somewhat literally, how in the world does this end up in a wrestling match? It reminds me of the Dexter Lumis storyline where he kidnapped members of the NXT roster for weeks and then came back and had his storybook wedding. Why wasn't he arrested? Or when Retribution destroyed thousands of dollars in WWE property and then gets drafted. Can you believe they drafted Retribution? Why would a brand draft Retribution? We should talk about that way more often. I think because it happened during the pandemic, you almost just excuse everything that happened. But Nick, I'm so glad you brought that up. I think we should never stop talking about the fact that Retribution got drafted. I just worry this ends with Uncle Howdy and his brainwashed, kidnapped, whatever family members just having squash matches with Tony D'Angelo for a month. Help, love the show. First of all, don't be pessimistic. I don't like pessimism. I don't like pessimism in wrestling. I don't like pessimism in life. There's no instance where I go, oh yeah, that was really fun. He was being super pessimistic. I do not like pessimism. Optimism. I get where you're coming from, though. All I can say is that The Fiend also should not have worked in wrestling matches, and The Fiend absolutely worked in wrestling matches. The idea of John Cena and Bray Wyatt having a battle inside the Firefly Funhouse, which was really just a trip through the mind and insecurities of John Cena, and it worked because of the people involved. Honestly, I think the only thing they did wrong with The Fiend was put the world title on him. I think once they put the world title on The Fiend, it became very, very difficult to have that character play out, because how do you take the title off of him? How do you put the title back in play? How do you not have other title contenders looking dumb? I think as long as you don't put a title on him and they can kind of exist where they exist, I say I love The Fiend. If The Fiend can do it, why couldn't this group do it? You know? Plus, we're all very excited watching these QR codes. So, Avik writes in, my man, what's the haps from London? Have you ever become more of a fan of a particular wrestler when you met them? For example, I always respected Jinder Mahal. Well, you can never hinder Jinder is the thing. Being someone who grew up in India, watching wrestling every week, starting from the New Gen era, then you know what I'm talking about with Waylon Mercy. Know what I mean? It seemed impossible for someone of Indian heritage to win the WWE title. When he did, I popped huge. But after meeting him in Philly over Mania weekend, I became a bigger fan simply because he was really nice to me, and other fans took pictures, checked if the pictures were okay, etc. Same goes for R-Truth. After attending the Not Sam live show in Philly, coming to Cleveland in August, and meeting him at the hotel, he's so funny and thankful. TV doesn't do Truth justice as to how funny he actually is. As soon as I got back home, I immediately ordered their shirts. So yeah, have you ever become a bigger fan after meeting a wrestler for the first time? If so, who? Just name a couple. I've become less of a fan of certain people, but let's not go there. See, Avik is an optimist. Absolutely. And a lot of it, you know, comes from my very unique perspective of getting to do this gig and creating this show. Watching Nick Aldis succeed and remembering sitting down with him in this room and talking to him when he left the NWA, not sure what was going to happen next, and talking to him about what his goals were and having that conversation on the record. That makes me so invested in the success of Nick Aldis. I would say this. I've always been a fan of Damian Priest, but go back and watch the interview that he did on The Bump 2 days after WrestleMania. It made me not only more of a fan of Damian Priest, but a fan of this title reign and him being a champion for a long period of time. And it wasn't just the interview, but the conversations that he and I had at WrestleMania, as well as in Stamford that day when he was in the studio to do The Bump. So Damian Priest is absolutely one of those people. It's hard, Adam Copeland, it's hard to imagine a time I wasn't a fan of that guy, but he didn't disappoint in person, MJF, the same way. So, yeah, I mean, to answer your question in short, yes. And it's happened many, 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 many times. Far more often than it doesn't. This, don't meet your heroes thing. People who get disappointed by their heroes, and that happens to them a lot, they probably are the problem. Because I've met a lot of great people. Ryan writes in, Sam, while I'm excited about what WWE could potentially do with Uncle Howdy, the team is competing with past attempts to move on with a show when the lead character departs. Past examples of this are Roseanne the Connors, The Office, Michael Scott, Marvel, Black Panther, Captain America, 2.5 Men, Charlie Sheen. I know there's more. What can WWE do to go against history and make this type of story a success? Ryan, I love what you did there. I love that you cited examples. I thought that was very good. I would say the difference is this is an offshoot. This is a potential spinoff. Frazier did extremely well coming off of Cheers. The Facts of Life did extremely well coming off of Different Strokes. After MASH did well, that's not a great example. But I see it more as a spin-off than a continuation. And that's where I think I have more faith in the process. Samuel writes in, Sam, quick question. Do you have any insight on when Behind the Curtain will be released? I know, I'm still patiently waiting every Wednesday for it. It should be on a Wednesday, right? No, I have no idea. I got so excited about it, and then it just didn't happen. You know, I mean, I think it'll just drop, and it'll drop. I think it'll be glorious when it does drop. I think it's going to be amazing, but no, I have absolutely no insight or idea on when. Good question. Kevin writes in, Sam, I'm listening to the emergency pod, and the cave that you speak of, I think maybe less Jesus Christ and more the allegory of the cave. Here are the points of the article that I think make this story relate more to the story of someone returning to save others. In the allegory, Plato describes the people that have spent their lives chained in a cave facing a blank wall. They watch shadows projected onto the wall by objects passing in front of a fire behind them. That would make sense because the cave had a glow to it when we saw the cave in the video. And they give names to these shadows. The shadows are the prisoners, are the prisoners' reality, but not accurate representations of the real world. The shadows represent the fragment of reality that we can normally perceive through our senses, while the objects under the sun represent the true form of the objects that we can only perceive through reason. 3 higher levels exist: natural science, deductive mathematics, geometry and logic, and the theory of forms. Socrates explains how the philosopher is like a prisoner who is freed from the cave and comes to understand that the shadows on the wall are actually not the direct source of the image seen. A philosopher aims to understand and perceive the higher levels of reality. However, the inmates of the cave do not even desire to leave their prison, for they know no better life. The shadows could be the puppets and the cave be the Firefly Funhouse for sure. Yeah. No, I think that there's something to that allegory too. And there was that fire to it. I like it. Rob writes in, got a suggestion that I think you're going to think is pretty cool. Sam heel turn. The WWE gives you your own show. The catch is it's a Mount Rushmore show that is done as the 4 best. Oh my God. We know this aggravates you to no end. Each week is more ridiculous topics like Mount Rushmore of Marty Jannetty firings, Mount Rushmore of Fantasio moments. He only had 1 match. I know that. Until finally they break you with a Mount Rushmore of Mike Adamle moments. You go crazy and destroy the set, all while ranting about Mount Rushmore new heel broadcaster Psycho Sam. The only reason that I like that is because you and I both, I know you did because you wrote Psycho Sam, thought of Psycho Sid destroying the barbershop with shaving cream on his face. And that is the one thing I keep telling Bill and Steve at Mattel. Do a crowd-funded barbershop playset and make one of the tiers a Psycho Sid figure that has a head that has shaving cream stuck to it. I think we got to end it there. Great emails. I can't tell you all how much I appreciate you guys and riding with me for the last, even if you've only been here, if this is your first week, I appreciate the fact that you have made at least one of these 500 weeks possible. You know this is great when you can do a show voluntarily for the most part for 500 weeks straight and have no signs of stopping. There is nothing in me that goes, okay, 500 is enough. Here's to 500 more. Maybe I'll be here for another decade. Who's to say? If you want me here, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening, iTunes, Spotify. Leave a rating, leave a review, subscribe on YouTube, watch the podcast on YouTube, leave comments, tell your friends about all of it. Spread the good word of Notsam Wrestling. Be there August 1st, 7:30 p.m. in Cleveland at Hilarities. Get tickets at the ticket link on notsam.com, and we will see you for episode 501 of Notsam Wrestling.